Billions of years ago, the two American continents became geologically separated from the Eastern Hemisphere land masses where humanity originated. North American Indian societies were less numerous and urbanized than those in Central and South America, though equally diverse in culture and social organization. The impetus for European exploration came from the desire for new trade routes to the east, the spirit and technological discoveries of the Renaissance, and the power of the new European national monarchies. Biological change, disease, population loss, conquest, African slavery, cultural change, and economic expansion were just some of the consequences of the coming of the Old World and the New World. After they conquered and then intermarried with Indians of the great civilizations of South America and Mexico, the Spanish conquistadors expanded northward into the northern border territories of Florida, New Mexico, and California. Chapter 2. The defeat of the Spanish Armada and the exuberant spirit of Elizabethan nationalism finally drew England into the colonial race. After some early failures, the first permanent English colony was established at Jamestown, Virginia. Other colonies were established in Maryland and the Carolinas. All the southern colonies depended on staple plantation agriculture for their survival and on institutions of indentured servitude and African slavery for their labor. The New England colonies were founded by English Puritans. The non-separating Puritans, led by John Winthrop, were led by John Winthrop, who founded the Massachusetts Bay Colony as part of the Great Migration of Puritans fleeing persecution in England in the 1630s. A strong sense of common purpose among the first settlers shaped the Massachusetts Bay Colony. Other New England settlements, all originating in Massachusetts Bay, were established in Connecticut, Maine, and New Hampshire. Although they shared a common way of life, the New England colonies developed with a substantial degree of independence. The Middle colonies took shape quite differently. Pennsylvania, founded as a Quaker haven by William Penn, also attracted an economically ambitious and politically troublesome population of diverse ethnic groups. With their economic variety, ethnic diversity, and political factionalism, the Middle colonies were the most typically American of England's 13 Atlantic seaboard colonies. Life was hard in the 17th century southern colonies. Families were few and fragile, with men greatly outnumbering women, who were much in demand and seldom remaining single for long. The tobacco economy first thrived on the labor of white indentured servants, who hoped to work their way up to become landowners and perhaps even become wealthy. With white labor increasingly troublesome, slaves began to be imported from West Africa by the tens of thousands in the 1680s and soon became essential to the colonial economy. By contrast with the South, New England's clean water and cool air contributed to a healthy way of life, which added 10 years to the average English lifespan. Rocky soil forced many New Englanders to turn to fishing and merchant shipping for their livelihoods. By 1775, the 13 American colonies east of the Appalachians were inhabited by a burgeoning population of 2 million whites and 500,000 blacks. The white population was increasingly a melting pot of diverse ethnic groups, including Germans and the Scotch-Irish. Compared with Europe, America was a land of equality and opportunity, but relative to the 17th century colonies, there was a rising economic hierarchy and increasing social complexity. By the early 18th century, the established New England Congregational Church was losing religious fervor. Like Britain, France entered late into the American colonial scramble, eventually developing an extensive, though thinly settled empire economically based on the fur trade. The culminating phase of this struggle was inaugurated by young George Washington's venture into the sharply contested Ohio country. The American colonials, who had played a large part in Britain's imperial wars with France, emerged with increased confidence in their own abilities. The American War of Independence was a military conflict fought from 1775 to 1783, but the American Revolution was a deeper transformation of thought and loyalty that began when the first settlers arrived in America and finally led to the colony's political separation from Britain. One source of long-term conflict was the tension between considerable freedom and self-government the colonists enjoyed in the American wilderness and their participation in British Empire's mercantile system. The short-term movement toward the War of Independence began with British attempts to impose higher taxes and tighter imperial controls after the French and Indian War. Through well-orchestrated agitation and boycotts, the colonists forced repeal of the Stamp Act of 1765, as well as the Townshend Act that replaced it, except for the symbolic tax on tea. In response to the Tea Party, the British imposed the harsh Intolerable Acts, coincidentally passed the Quebec Act at the same time. As the two sides prepared for war, the British enjoyed the advantages of a larger population, a professionally trained militia, and much greater economic strength. Even after Lexington and Concord, the Second Continental Congress did not at first pursue independence. After further armed clashes, George III formally proclaimed the colonists in rebellion, and Thomas Paine's common sense finally persuaded Americans to fight for independence as well as liberty. The committed patriots, only a minority of the American population, had to fight both Loyalist Americans and the British. In the first phase of the war, Washington stalemated the British, who botched their plan to quash the rebellion quickly at Saratoga.